All right. Today we're going to be answering the question, what is astrology? Giving you a nice comprehensive description by going through three different approaches or three different perspectives, three different great men or human beings, better put, who would answer the question in three different ways. What is astrology? And then we're also going to be going to the purpose, the application, why astrology. Not just what is astrology, but why astrology. Okay? So first we start with Ptolemy. Ptolemy was a Greek mathematician and astronomer who lived around, I believe, 100 BC or around Jesus' time. He was one of Jesus's human contemporaries in the sense that he was alive at that time. So around 2,000 years ago, okay? Now, Ptolemy is very famous. He's pretty much the godfather, OG of Western astrology. He authored one of the first most important books for Western astrologies in the Greek pantheon or in the Greek world, Western world, right? And also his house system that he invented, the Placidus system, is the most popular housing system used in the world today. I'm personally not a big fan of it, but that'll be talked about in a later video, in a couple videos when we start talking about the houses, but we're just kind of doing the bare bones foundation of astrology, right? So Ptolemy was a mathematician, astronomer, and he was in Greece. So what does that mean? Back then, traditional astrologers and also Hellenistic astrologers took up the mantle after Ptolemy was passed. They focused very much on the physical. And we're going to get to that in a second. But how would they describe or how would they explain the phenomenon of astrology? They would essentially say that astrology is a result or effective because the different planets, they have a certain celestial aura or energy that creates different celestial atmospheres in the heavens, in the sky. And that affects life down here on Earth. It affects the way organic organisms move through space. And also the energy. A simplistic way of thinking about this would be the seasons, right? How somebody can have seasonal affective disorder or seasonal depression, to put it in layman's terms, okay? So during the winter, somebody gets depressed. Their feelings are different based off of the movement of the sun. The tides move in and out with the moon when it waxes and it wanes. So those two planets, the sun and the moon, produce a tangible, very conspicuous, right? Very obvious effect on our mental and physical state, because you have to think of it too like it's almost like the circadian rhythm of an organism. So astronomers, astrologers in the Ptolemaic school, traditional Greek astrologers and maybe even modern astrologers too that are based in that system, they would explain and say, okay, astrology is essentially the planets, the celestial bodies, creating formations, moving through the sky, moving through the heavens, and interacting with each other energetically, and that affects the way the atmosphere and the organisms exist here on Earth. And on a person's birth, at a birth of anything actually, living organism's birth, there's a celestial atmosphere, or if you want to put it in more modern scientific terms, there's an electromagnetic frequency, an environment that will affect that organism for the rest of its life. So each planet has its own electromagnetic frequency. This affects living beings on Earth. And at that birth, when a being comes in, takes its first breath of that celestial atmosphere, of that electromagnetic frequencies, based off of the planetary permutations, the shapes and the organized in the sky, in the heavens, that will affect how that human being, that organism moves through life. All right? So it takes more of a scientific approach, being that there is a direct causal effect. Okay? And it happens through the ether. So they call it the ether, which is just kind of like another way of putting it would be like dark matter, or that space in between atoms And through that ether is how information, energy, whatever you want to call it, is transferred down here on Earth. Now, the main purpose of Ptolemaic or Hellenistic or traditional Western Greek astrology is to maneuver the physical world, maneuver the physical plane, the three-dimensional plane. So when you're going to do traditional astrology, traditional astrologers will really focus on events and treat them more as if they're fated. So the reason why you would want to foretell or predict an event, and also it's mostly prediction based. It does touch on the personality at times, but the main goal of traditional astrologers back then, in the Ptolemaic era, and for Hellenistic astrologers, is to predict a physical event so you can prepare for it. Meaning, if you know that you predict using traditional astrology, Western astrology, you predict that you're going to have a kid in 2 years. And so based off that information, you start to work harder because you need to make money or prepare for whatever. You have to move somewhere that maybe might be more hospitable to having a child. You're making practical decisions, practical changes in your life to make sure that the future practical events, physical events in your life unfold smoother and you're more better prepared. Also, there's something called medical astrology. So same thing, traditional astrologers would map the planets to different parts of the body. I think one example would be Jupiter is your brain. And by understanding a person's chart, you can actually learn through this form of astrology certain weaknesses or certain illnesses or certain injuries they might receive. So meaning that a person can become conscious of where they are, let's say, weak in their constitution, constitutionally weak. And so they can avoid things that might trigger it, whether it be certain foods, certain environments, certain activities. You get the point. If you find out, oh, I have weak knees because, Capricorn's afflicted or whatever it may be, then I'm going to make sure I don't, run on pavement every day, right? Or if I figure out I have a weak heart, probably make sure that I avoid stressful environments or, take actions, eat foods that are good for the heart or good for the brain if you have weak Jupiter, things like that. So that would be the applied or purpose of this traditional form of Western astrology, also called Hellenistic astrology. It's very fated. And they believe that if we saw it in the chart, 90% you couldn't change it. It is what it is. It's just based off of the gods and the physical energies and the electromagnetic energies and the celestial bodies and the environment. You are just a product of your environment. It is what it is. Do your best to prepare and develop yourself and to live the best practical life. So they're very much concerned with living a comfortable, fruitful, and fulfilling physical existence on this plane. Now, obviously, that's not every single Hellenistic astrologer, but that's just kind of the general, really, really focused on three-dimensional space, really, really focused on the physical. Now we go to Jung. Now, Carl Jung wasn't an astrologer, but he was a psychologist and he utilized astrology in his practice. Many people don't know that. Yes, that is true. You can look it up. You can Google it or AI it now. And so he wasn't an astrologer, but I believe he does the best job of explaining what a lot of modern Western astrologers do, which is the psychological psyche approach or psychic approach, I guess. Way to put it, psychic approach to astrology. So Jung, the way that he approached astrology, the way he utilized it, he used it as a diagnostic mechanism, diagnostic tool. I also do the same. I think he's a genius. So I agree with this take of he would approach it where each planet in the sky is an archetypal representation or piece, let's say archetypal piece of the collective unconscious. And by looking at a person's chart, you're looking at the map of the psyche. So Ptolemy, you're looking at the map of their physical existence and their overall disposition, but like you're looking at their fate, almost like you're looking at the game of life and you're seeing the path of like college and you're just seeing the physical map of their entire existence. That's Ptolemaic. Jung is you're looking at the map of their psychology. It's almost like you're looking at their Myers-Briggs test, or you're looking at, their Big Five test, or an Enneagram, things like that. You're looking at their internal framework, right? And the way that astrology works, according to Jung, or the more psychological approach, is that it's synchronistic. Now, synchronicity is just a extremely unusual coincidence, meaning you're walking down the street, you think about your best friend, and they call you. Or you tell your friend that you really, really miss this type of ice cream, and then a week later, you're visiting your parents and you find that ice cream, or you're online. I guess that would make more sense. You're online and you see an advertisement for that type of ice cream, that type of clothing, whatever it may be. Meaning you're thinking of something, or you have a dream that something's going to happen. I've had family members have prophetic dreams where you believe someone may die or something may happen, and then that thing happens, or something very close, symbolically aligned with that event in your dream happens externally. And it's like, how do you explain that? Did your dream cause that external event? Who can say? But the way to think about it is that you take a hermetic approach, right? As above, so below. One of the most important laws of Hermeticism. As above, so below. The micro reflects the macro reflects the micro. If you've ever seen a picture of a galaxy, it looks just like a close-up version of the eye. Or if you've ever seen, an atom, you see fractals, or these spirals that just keep going. There's like a spiral within a spiral within a spiral. So when you're looking at the heavens, you're actually looking at the reflection, the mirror image of what's happening in the collective unconscious, in the psyche. Okay? So it's not that the planets affect directly human beings in our psyche. It's just that when you look at the transits, when you look at a birth chart, you are just seeing it is a physical manifestation of what is happening internally. It is a reflection. It's bidirectional. Right? And another way to think about it would be it's 12 o'clock and you eat lunch every day at 12 o'clock. When you look at the clock and it says 12, is the clock causing you to eat? Not necessarily, but it's more so reflecting the hunger inside of you, or the desire to eat. It's a reflection of it. It's not causing you to be hungry. It's just aligned with your hunger. It is simultaneous. It's almost like two particles that are entangled. They're not causing each other to act the way. They're just purely entangled. So you can think of your psyche as purely entangled with the celestial bodies in the sky. And they each represent a different piece of the collective unconscious, so it reflects the psyche. And we project our unconscious phenomena, internal existence, onto the heavens, seeing the archetypes in the sky. And by reading the stars, by reading the planets, the grahas, however you want to put it, you can learn about somebody's internal state and also learn about their unconscious blocks, their psychological blocks, their strengths and weaknesses, where they need to go in life, what they need to do to change, to be happier, or get through an obstacle, or whatever it may be, or certain psychological lessons they need to learn in this incarnation. Very much psychologically based. There's a lot more free will in Jung, a lot less free will. The least amount of free will out of all three is in Ptolemaic. It's like this is your life. This is what's going to happen. It is what it is, my G. Like, it's just that simple. This is, okay, the heavens are a representation of your psyche, but you have a lot of free will to maximize the archetypal events that'll happen in your life. Within an archetype, there's positive and negative. So some arenas, some archetypal themes like Scorpio, again, we're going to get into all that later in the series of videos, is more difficult. It's related to our inner demons and our trauma. But there's a positive side and a negative side. The negative side is that you fall victim to your inner demons, you fall into addiction, you become antisocial, self-destructive, whatever it is, narcissistic. The list goes on, especially with Scorpio when it comes to the negative. But the positive is you can go into transformation, being deeply intuitive, intense, aware. So with the Jungian perspective, that psychological, more of the modern American Western astrological take is that there's no such thing as good and bad in the chart. There's a shadow side and a light side. And it's up to you and your free will to choose which end of the spectrum, the more negative side, destructive side or the more creative, positive, sustainable side of each of these themes. Okay? And so purpose is psychological development. Jung thought that it was a really important tool to, like I said, notice the psychological blocks, the things that are holding somebody back from the individuation process, which is becoming a whole being. Some people call it becoming enlightened or perfectly aligned or finding inner peace, contentment, becoming the best version of yourself. These are all different ways of saying that, psychologically speaking, modern Western astrologers believe that is the proper tool to get there. Now, it's not the only tool, obviously. There's many different tools, especially in the occult, which I find the most interesting. But there's also conventional approaches, right? You have modern psychology. But I believe Jung was onto something. So again, it's not directly causal. It's not like the planets are affecting you directly. It is just that they are reflecting what the collective unconscious is doing. So you're learning about the collective unconscious by looking at heavens, because they are always going to be a reflection of each other. All right. Now, Parashara. Parashara is the OG, the godfather of Vedic astrology in India. Now, he was a sage. He was a guru. I believe he was a yogi. I can't imagine he wasn't, but I'm not 100% certain. So don't shoot me if I'm wrong, but I believe he was also a yogi. He's a guru, guide, but essentially what's most important about him is that he was an enlightened sage. And he gave astrology to us humans as, let's say, a system to guide us in the spiritual domain. Now, Parashara would say, so how would he answer it? How would he most likely, based off my perspective, answer the question, what is astrology? Well, he would say that astrology is the tool for spiritual actualization and development. So it's mostly spiritual based with Parashara. Now, the way that he would describe how it works, how does astrology essentially function? Well, astrology is the fact that each celestial body, Mars, Jupiter, Sun, Moon, the planets, hopefully. If not, you will, if you continue watching. But all of the planets are beings, conscious beings, cosmic beings, gods, right? And the Greeks also believed that the planets were gods, but it's kind of dependent on the school. And Jung kind of said the same thing by calling them archetypes. Archetypes are pretty much just gods. They're the same thing. We're just using different terms to say the same stuff, okay? But from the Parashara perspective, each planet is its own god. It's a concentration of a particular type of consciousness. So Mars is kind of that warrior god. Venus is more of the harmonious love, relationship god. Jupiter, abundance, wisdom, guru type god. You get the point, okay? And we're going to get into all that later down the series as you continue to watch. But the planets are essentially gods who yoke you, because they're called grahas, which sees you into the fruits of your karma, meaning that your chart is based off of your past lives, your past life karma. Another way of thinking about karma too, because people kind of get it twisted, right? Think of it like you're looking at your trajectory. So say you're driving north towards Antarctica. I know that doesn't make sense, but or let's say sailing. That makes more sense, right? Say you're sailing towards Antarctica. The chart is, but as a spiritual, as a spirit, as a being, it's the soul blueprint. But when you reincarnate, you forget your past lives. You forget that you were existing before, all right? So you use astrology to realize, oh, damn, I don't know where I am. And then you realize, oh, I'm actually on this ship and I'm headed for north or for Antarctica, for the Arctic, right? Or the North Pole. I think Antarctica is down there. The North Pole, you get the points. Don't attack me. Just, north. You're headed north towards Canada or something. So you're going north, but every day you wake up, you forget, right? Because the reincarnation is the death rebirth cycle. You constantly forget about your previous incarnations. You don't know the trajectory you're on. Well, astrology tells you, hey, this is the path your soul's on. This is where you've been. This is where you've been. And based off of your momentum, this is where you're going to go. And that's how you use prediction in astrology, in Vedic astrology, is based off of the past, we're going to predict the future. So if you're somebody who drinks every day at 5 p.m., I'm going to predict that tomorrow you're going to drink 5 p.m. Right? If I've seen that you always attract toxic partners, I'm going to predict that your next relationship, you're going to predict a toxic partner. That is karma. That is astrology from the Parashara perspective. We're looking at the way your energy, your soul has maneuvered incarnations in the past, and you have a certain spiritual energetic momentum coming into this lifetime. And so you're going to continue in that path unless you become consciously, spiritually actualized, enlightened, or you practice spiritual practices to move yourself. So there's still room for free will here as well. You can move yourself away. It's almost like changing your habit. Can somebody who's been drinking every day for the past 20 years stop drinking tomorrow? Yes. Is it very unlikely? Of course. But there have been people who do it, people who've gotten sober and stayed sober the rest of their lives. So it's always possible. You always have free will. You always have that space. Now, most of life in the Parashara system, let's say 75% is fated. It's based off your past karma. You can't change it. But you do have 25% of free will to move that needle, and 25% is a lot more than you think. Because all you need to do is move it a little bit and you completely change your destiny, completely change your path. So when you're looking at the birth chart from the Parashara Vedic perspective, you're looking at somebody's karmic blueprint. You're looking at the plan of their soul. You're looking at where they're going and where they've come from based off of a multitude of incarnations, and you're perceiving them as a spiritual being enjoying or experiencing this temporary human existence. Okay? And so that is what the purpose of the Parashara Vedic astrology system is what are the best times to initiate spiritual practices? What are the types of spiritual practices that are most conducive for you? Because not everybody's going to take to the same spiritual practices. Some people do better with yoga or pranayama or meditation or scripture, or they need a guru or they don't need a guru. Sometimes somebody gets all of those things, or somebody gets only one of those things, or something else that I didn't mention, because there's many different factions, many different sects and approaches to reach spiritual actualization in the Vedic system. But all you need to understand is that, yes, it's for spiritual evolution. So timing of spiritual events, type of spiritual events, also understanding one's dharma or purpose in this life. Dharma, you can think of it as natural state of being. So, swimming is a fish's dharma. Same with a shark. Sharks eating other fish, that's their dharma, right? Michael Jordan playing basketball, he was doing his dharma. It's something that just feels natural. It's effortless because it's who you are. A tiger doesn't need to think about being a tiger or, oh my God, I wish I was a lion. It's like, no, I'm a tiger. A tiger does what a tiger does. Eats meat, produces, reproduces, walks around, hangs out. It's not that, it's very aligned, a tiger. It's human beings that, we psych ourselves out. We have these different parts that are conflicting with each other, which are the planets, and we're going to get into that later as well. So that internal conflict, that lack of alignment with our dharma is pretty much exclusively a human thing, aside from maybe some pets, because they're subject to our influence as humans. And so we project our crazy onto those poor things and they get sick, and it's a whole other can of worms we don't have to get into. But with this Parashara Vedic approach to astrology, which is the approach I use, this is why you see this weird square chart. This is the Vedic chart. It's an approach to all about spiritual evolution, knowing one's dharma, and finding the best ways and path to progress along that path of spiritual actualization to enlightenment as fast and smooth, as easy as possible. Okay? Thank you for your time listening to me ramble about these different perspectives, but that is just a general idea of what astrology is. In the next video, we're going to walk over a very simplistic way of reading a birth chart so you can start reading yours, follow along while you watch these lessons, and perhaps in the future, read your friends and family birth charts as well to help them on their spiritual path, on their psychological path, or their physical path. All right. Cheers.